In this video, you're going to learn about the structure and function of the cell. The teacher's already instructed you on how to download the notes that you're going to need for this particular section or chapter. So you can see the vocabulary that you're going to need to know here, including some vocabulary we'll talk about later on that are not covered in this video. And you have these diagrams of cells which we're going to color in the classroom. So let's take a look at some of the features, the overall features of the cell. In our work on the characteristics of life, we talked about the fact that all living things possess cells. There are basic features that all cells share in common, but not all cells are exactly the same, and that's something we discuss later on in the chapter. You'll see that this picture matches the picture that you have that we'll be working on in the classroom to color in. You can label as you go if you want. But we're going to start with two basic features that all cells share in common. The first that you're going to see is that all cells have an outside covering. Now this particular cell right here is representing an animal cell. It looks kind of like a Death Star, so it's in this picture it's making it look like it's nice and perfectly round. But in fact, true animal cells, like cells that you would look at from your, inside of your mouth, your cheek cells, do not look perfectly like this. They kind of have this wrinkled finger-like folds on the outside here. But this outside covering is something that's found in all cells, whether it's an animal, a plant, or even a bacteria. This is called the cell membrane. And the cell membrane is a covering. Now, as we discuss each of these structures, we're going to talk about what their function is. And the main function of a covering is to protect. In this case, the cell membrane controls the movement of substances into and out of the cell. So things like poisons that you don't want coming into the cell, and that's part of the job of the cell membrane to make sure that those don't enter the cell. But water is something that you do want coming into the cell, so the cell membrane has little pores that allow water to flow through relatively easily. Water can move in and out. Now, as we go along, here are the definitions. This is your first definition that you need to get down. Please feel free to pause the video for however long you need to copy this down. And then we're going to continue onward. So once you start the video again, you can continue with the next part. The second thing that all cells have in common is that they have what's called cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is a jelly. It's a mixture of water, minerals, and nutrients. And in fact, Jello that you eat and jelly that you eat is in fact the cytoplasm, typically of fruits. Inside that cytoplasm, many cells, most cells, other than bacteria, have organelles. And these are structures in the cell that have a specific function. And we're going to talk about each of those structures in turn and talk about what their specific function is. So the first one we're going to focus on, that most noticeable in the cell and that we've seen in the laboratory looking at cells, is the nucleus. It's usually this big ball-shaped structure. It doesn't have to be located exactly in the middle of the cell, but frequently it is. The nucleus is the control center of the cell. And to do so, it contains structures called chromosomes. Chromosomes help the nucleus do their control. So this is our nucleus right here in the center, kind of looking like a golf ball inside the cell. Here's a close-up of it. Inside, we would find these little clothespin-looking things, sometimes under the microscope, under certain kinds of microscope, the electron microscope. They actually look like, kind of look like Cheetos in a way. And these chromosomes contain DNA. So you've probably heard of DNA. DNA controls your traits and your characteristics. And you have a set number of these. So these are worm-like structures, usually visible only when the cell reproduces. And these contain genetic information. Now we're not going to talk much about DNA and cell reproduction this year. This is something that the 8th grade will cover. And you'll be covering as 8th graders. So these are not usually seen in the cell, and in our picture here, you can't really see them. But you can kind of see like the makeup here, kind of like forming like a web inside the nucleus. But you can't see the individual chromosomes. The next structure that we're going to look at is the endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum. Many scientists or many students frequently refer to this simply as ER, short for endoplasmic reticulum, and you are welcome to go ahead and refer to it as that. This is a network of shelves and canals that provide a surface for making and transporting proteins and fats throughout the cell. So think of it kind of like the bookshelves that we use in a room. We still use those for storing books. But in this case, something's actually being made on those shelves. Here is the endoplasmic reticulum right here. And you see this one's kind of freckled. You see it has freckles on there. We're going to talk about those freckles. And these out here don't have the freckles. There's actually two different kinds of endoplasmic reticulum. There's what's called smooth ER, that's this out here, and a rough ER. So you can see a close-up of the two right here. Now those freckles that you're seeing are called ribosomes. Ribosomes are the structures that actually make protein. They're little bead-like structures, and they're usually stuck in the ER. But we also find many of them inside the cytoplasm. So these little dots that we see right here are also representing ribosomes. Lots of ribosomes throughout the cell. So we're going to talk about the importance of the need for protein. Protein's used for building things like muscle and bone and many of the structures that make up your body, many of the organs that make up your body. The next structure we're going to look at is called the Golgi apparatus, sometimes called Golgi body. It makes something called lysosomes, another cell structure we're going to talk about, and packages cell products such as proteins for export from the cell. So packaging up things that are being made so it can be sent out of the cell. So here's the Golgi apparatus right here. Kind of looking, I think it always looks kind of like a big extra long hot dog squished in too small of a bun. And here it's making little bubbles of things that are eventually going to go out of or leave the cell, including this thing right here, which is called a lysosome. Here's a way to think of the function of the Golgi apparatus. It's kind of a manufacturing plant. So here's an old-fashioned video that will help give you the idea of how that works.
Attention foreman. Trouble on bench 5. Check on the nut tightness. Dust coming through loose on bench 5. Attention foreman.
So you can think of the character that you're seeing right here, whose name is Charlie Chaplin, a famous actor from the early 1900s, and he's working on proteins. He's making sure that they're going to be able to do the jobs that they're supposed to do. He's doing this in the Golgi apparatus. So the proteins are made in a ribosome, and then they're put together and finalized, as he's kind of finalizing whatever these metal plates are, in the Golgi apparatus. Proteins such as the muscle that makes up your body, hormones that control your activities, and things such as hemoglobin, which is in your blood. Lysosomes that we saw are sac-like structures that contain enzymes for digesting food or even breaking down unwanted substances. And we see our lysosome right here. The mitochondria is a bean-like structure that makes cell energy in the form of a compound known as ATP. And we're going to talk about that later on. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And this ATP that it's making, you can think of kind of like gasoline. So the mitochondria is almost like an oil refinery in that it's turning in the food that you eat into the gasoline that will run your body, this ATP. So it's supplying power for your body. Here we see the mitochondria right here. You can see how they're all wrinkled on the inside. There's one over here, and one here. Finally, the entire cell has an internal support, a network of microtubules and microfibers, kind of like scaffolding that's put up against a building by people who are working on the building, and they provide an internal support and shape. This is called the cytoskeleton. Cytoskeleton. So keep in mind that we've got the two words cytoplasm and cytoskeleton now. What do you think the word cyto means? We will discuss that in class. So here's the makeup of our cytoskeleton right here. And you can see the microtubules, like little pipes running through the cells, and then these little fibers connecting between the pipes that provide support. Here's an actual photograph of the cell, similar to the cells inside your mouth, showing the cytoskeleton. And you can see how the nucleus is right in the middle of it.